let's talk about the stigma around genetic differences, which has been initially one of the big barriers people have had. You've said in a previous interview that in the notorious book, The Bell Curve, Douglas Murray on some instances was just presenting data, but on other instances was definitely drawing racist conclusions and inferences out of it. How do you find that line? It seems like such a tough line to find. Even the founder of DNA, James Watson, has not been able to find that line.
Yeah. He kind of went dark. So we have to say, well, what are our principles? And what is biology telling us? So I think it's that when we talk about lowercase diversity, equity, inclusion, these are wonderful attributes. Diversity isn't some kind of nice to have for humans. Diversity in the Darwinian context is the random mutation and natural selection. It's a need to have. It's the driver of all of our evolution and our survival. Inclusion and equity is the exact same thing. Just imagine that we were living in some little nomadic community and being pressured by the elements and predators and other little groups someplace else. And we had said, the way our little group is going to survive is if everybody contributes maximally to the best of their abilities. Like that's equity and inclusion in that context just means survival. Because if you have, a little village and like one person is doing everything and a bunch of other people are doing nothing and not able to contribute their gifts to the good of everybody, that little village is going to basically be screwed. And so lowercase DEI, I think is essential. We also need to recognize that when we talk about diversity, it means that we are all different. That is the inherent point of diversity. We are different from each other. We are all different from each other. And some groups are different from other groups. It just is. That doesn't mean every group is different. That doesn't mean that every group doesn't have special, unique, and equally valuable contributions. But when there are groups that have been separated from each other by tens of thousands of years, you can just see what happens. I'm going to New Zealand next week. And that's what happened to all the megafauna in New Zealand. They were separate from their ancestors and they evolved just in different ways. That's what happens with humans. That's why you can look at the Olympics 100-meter races and you just look at who's running, and it has nothing to do with how far their school was from where they grew up. It has everything to do that pretty much everyone, certainly in the marathon, everyone who the top, I'm getting this number wrong, but let's say 150 of the 200 fastest marathon times in history were for people from the Rift Valley in Africa. We just have difference from each other, and sometimes those differences show up in groups. The reason why the bell curve, it went overboard is it kind of generalized in these kind of broad categories. So when you talk about a group like Africans or African Americans, Africans are the most diverse group of humans on Earth, which is logical because only a small number of our ancestor Homo sapiens were the ones who left Africa and however long it was, and there's some debate, 50,000, 70,000 years ago. So there was a subset of that group. So to make kind of broad generalizations based on, as they sometimes do, I think that is unethical. But to recognize that there are real differences between people that actually show up. They show up in healthcare. They show up because people of different backgrounds can have different responses to different drugs. And I just think that we our path forward can't be blinding ourselves to difference. And we shouldn't want to say that everybody is the same in the exact ways, because the entire point is to say, well, everybody is different and everybody has unique and special capabilities. Nobody's special capabilities are better than anybody else's. And that's why what I was saying before, if we have people within our societies or in our world who aren't getting adequate health care, who aren't getting adequate education, it doesn't just suck for them. It sucks for us. We are the people who aren't benefiting from the contributions of the disadvantaged and the disempowered. And so the most selfish thing that we can do is to say, well, how can we help everybody get educated and empowered and contribute? I give a lot of keynotes in the kind of longevity science world. And I always piss people off because I say, like, it's great if Silicon Valley billionaires want to live longer. They can do the DIY self-experimentation like Brian Johnson is doing on himself. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. We have no clue. But it's certainly, if we say, well, we want to increase average lifespan, average health span and lifespan, but let's focus on lifespan, we know how to do it. Because you and I were recording this in New York. We can just get on the subway, and in 15 minutes, we can be in a part of our own town where average lifespan is 10 years younger. Or you can fly to parts of the developing world where it's 20 years less average lifespan. So if we set a goal for ourselves of let's increase average lifespan, and you say, well, what's the easiest way to do it? And so we're going to cheat. We're going to try to address infant mortality, people who are dying of totally avoidable infectious diseases, and that's why everything seems to come back to this kind of all of us principle. And certainly, I'm an American. We have our kind of frontier, do-it-yourself mentality, but it's true and it's not true. I mean, we humans are a social, communal species, and I just think that for everything that we're talking about to succeed maximally, we really need to say, how do we bring everybody together? Which doesn't mean that everybody is going to be doing genome editing in a lab. People are going to be doing different things, but the more we recognize that and value that, the better off we'll be.
A lot of interesting points. I definitely agree with you that there's some form of selection that's already baked into society that we don't always openly acknowledge. You brought up sports. You love the Iron Man. Some people like pain and suffering, I guess. But you're right.
You just need to rebrand it as joy.
Joy. Yeah. That's what I think when I look at the Iron Man. In ultra marathons, long distance running, you brought it up. They've been dominated by Kenyans, Ethiopians, African Americans dominate NBA. In professions, women are more likely to be found in caregiving professions or interact with other humans like nurses and teachers. Men are more likely to be found in professions, physical labor like construction, plumbing, truck drivers. Even in relationships, if you go to Harvard University and you find your partner there, or you work in a big tech company and you find a partner there, it's some form of selection. I don't know if it's genetic or not. So in that sense, that's already selection.
It's genetic and not. I mean, I'm saying if you find if you find your partner at Harvard, it's genetic and it's not genetic. But it would just be impossible to say that there is not some genetic component of getting into Harvard. There just is. And I mean, people may not like to hear that, but there just is.
I agree. And with that lens, then it doesn't seem that much of a radical idea to start talking about genetic selection. It's already part of society. We're just not acknowledging it.
So it's a great point. I make that point in the context of agriculture, because you meet all of these people, and we live in New York, so we know them. We say, I only buy my fruits and vegetables sustainable and organic from Whole Foods. And when I tell people, it's like, you are a radical biotechnologist, because agriculture is one of the most radical, revolutionary biotechnologies in human history.
Right.
And so if you're eating those foods, you are eating biotechnology. The difference between modern corn and its precursor weed, teosinte, is humongous. The difference between modern corn and GMO corn is almost negligible. So if you're against the application of science in food, by all means, don't eat corn. But don't try to fool yourself to that your kind of radical thing is eating sustainable organic corn from Whole Foods. Even though it's a nice thing, I think it's good to have farm fresh products and diversify our microbiomes and other things. So it's just the same point really across the board.